For today's tutorial, I'm covering off a project that is for my own home. I think this one will be quite interesting. It's a bed frame. You can see it just there. We'll take a close look in a moment. This is always a tough thing for me to showcase to you because it's got no real flat finish. The interesting projects tend to be the bulkier, solid pieces so you can see the great details. So I'm going to go with this. I'm going to try and create lots of interesting textures and age and patina to this metal bed frame. It is one of those really lightweight faux Victorian bed frames. We get a lot of this in the UK. I've picked this up for 30 English pounds, which I think was an absolute steal. I chose it because I just love the shape of it. Now this is going into a small bedroom at the back of our house, which would have been the servants' quarters of our Edwardian home. And I thought this would be just absolutely perfect with lots of chippy, textural, layered paint, just to look like it's been used for many, many years and as if it was always in the house. So let's take a closer look at the actual project. Okay guys, just give me 3 minutes to talk you through my train of thought with this project. So we know that we're going for a chippy look. Now this could be any colour choices of yours. It's about layering those layers of paint on the surface of this bed frame. So I've decided that the room that this is going into, it's painted old white. It's one of the smallest rooms in the house. I want it to have a garden-like vibe. So can you guess the colour that I'm going to go with? No surprise to any of you, I'm going to go with a green. I absolutely love kind of those vintage old paintworks that are green and crummy and beautiful. So that's the first thing to do. I've given the bed a good old clean with some, this was just with dish soap through a spray bottle, wiped it all down, left it to dry, so it's good to go. No need for any prep over this finish. Although this is kind of a shiny spray painted finish, that's fine. This may show itself at some point in the project underneath those layers. And I suppose whilst we're talking about layers, if this was a bed of 100 and 150 years old, it may have had old paint, old gloss oil-based paint, layered and layered, different colours after so many years when it gets new coats of paint. And they would be, once this gets knocks and bruises, they would be the layers that would show underneath. So that's exactly what we're going to do. We're going to follow history to create layers of paint. So the first colour, I'm going in with En Fleur. And that will be just a, think of this as your primer coat, a nice thin coat. Don't worry about seeing these colours underneath, it's fine. Then we'll layer it up with another coat of En Fleur. It should be a little bit more solid. Then we'll start thinking about the other colours that we want to show through the overall finished colour. So that's where I'm going. That was a lot of speaking. I hope you're still with me. So that's the premise of what we're going to do. So let's get stuck in with that first coat of En Fleur. first coat of paint has had a good couple of hours to dry. It's super cold in my workshop today, so I've left it a little bit longer than I naturally would. If it's warm in your climate, leave it outside. It'll dry really, really quick. You must allow the paint to dry really, really well on that first coat, because when you apply the second coat, the moisture from that layer of paint can reactivate the paint underneath and it will pull away. So to combat that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to apply the paint with a stipple motion on the second coat, which will also add lots of lovely texture to the surface of the piece. I'll give you a close-up of how this is looking right now. It really should show brush strokes. It won't particularly look that good on the first coat, so don't fear when you're painting over something like this. This is exactly how it should look. So let's move on to the stipple coat of painting with the Enfleur again, and we'll get much better coverage the second time around. Okay, so the Enfleur has now dried. It does need quite a lot of drying time, especially when it's cold and damp like it is in the UK. If you're in the warm climate, of course, it'll dry much quicker. There is one or two little areas where there's little bits of white poking through. I'm not worried about that. This is not going to be the overall finish. I'm going to take you through the look that I'm going for. Now, I want the green to be the strongest tone over the whole piece, but I do want one or two other colours shining through. So I've decided to go with Primer Red. This already looks kind of rusty in its tone now, so Enfleur is a great colour. If you want to create a rusty finish, Enfleur's great. Mix it with a bit of Primer Red, Barcelona Orange, stipple it in, great. You may have seen my other tutorials for the rusty finish. But what I thought I would do is I want to make this look naturally worn and torn, if that makes sense. So the top half, along the top where it would get more distressed over time, I want more enfleur and the primer red showing. So I'm going to add primer red with a little artist brush just in key areas. Things like this little cartouche in the middle, I'm going to add a bit more primer red there, maybe around connections and just coming down. But I also want to add some more white to the piece. Now you think I'm crazy because I've painted it on flare when it was already white, but this is about the layered process. And we may get some of the original base coat come through as we distress this later, but I want it to be in kind of layers. So the white, where I'm going to place the white majorly is from sort of, I'm not going to do the legs because I kind of think the legs would get knocked around a little bit more, the lower leg. I'm going to kind of do it midway, sort of midway through, just randomly painted on midway through. We are going to use another technique for a different kind of texture. We've got the rusty texture by the stippling. The primer red, I'm just going to paint it on here, there and everywhere and kind of bring it down. Once that's dried, we'll go back in with the colour that I've chosen is original to add that white tone back. And then we can do the fun part with mixing a green and adding some crackle maybe, and then it's distressing, finishing. So let's start adding a little bit of primer red to some key areas, kind of on the top, maybe a little bit at the bottom, just randomly random. Okay, so the primer red is now dry. We're going to add this touch of original, Annie-Sloan original, which is kind of a quite creamy white, almost similar to the colour that was underneath. And we're going to add it kind of to the mid portions, just randomly, and then a spot here and there at the top. And how I'm going to apply this is I'm going to use quite a large chip brush, and I'm going to dot it on, and then I'm going to heat it up with a hairdryer to semi-dry it and then drag the brush over it, which should create sort of textures. So, in for a penny, in for a pound, let's go for it. So I'm now day 2 of this project. It's had overnight to dry, which is probably quite good on this sort of substrate. Leave it overnight, everything will harden really well. I have been tinkering around this morning. I've taken a look and felt, oh, is there a bit too much white? I suppose it's about proportional amounts of these colours, because we may see flecks of them, well, we will do, I'm pretty sure, as we distress back with Crackle and other ways of distressing towards the end. So what I have done this morning is used a little bit more Enfleur and just added a few patches of Enfleur here and there, and underneath the connections, like up there, underneath that finial, I've decided to add a little bit more where rust would kind of ingress underneath certain areas in connections really. So we talked a little bit about Crackle. So there is many ways to create a Crackle effect with paint. You can use craft glue, PVA glue to create a Crackle. You can use Annie Sloan Crackler in a different way. That normally sits at the end of the project. So you create the Crackle over the top of the finish and then add wax into it, but you won't see those other colours through. Or you could use the tutorial that I did mixing the Crackle into paint, which you'll get this kind of finish. I did it on the workshop drawers there. I think you've all seen it. And if you haven't seen it, I'll link that version of how to create Crackle in the description box. So I'll link that down below so you can watch that if you've got those products to hand. But I'm gonna cheat today. I've got a product that I know to be really, really good. It's kind of a one-step Crackle. It's just a varnish, and then once it's dried, you paint over it, this is a magic product, an Italian company, and it's called Crackle. So I'm gonna cheat with that because of speed. My version of the big split Crackle, you have to mix part 2 into your paint. It's a little bit more long-winded, but check it out. If you haven't seen it, it's quite fun to do. So where I'm gonna lay the Crackle is how I'm gonna lay it. I know this product to be that the thicker you lay the Crackle varnish down, the bigger the cracks will be. So I'm thinking of how I'm going to lay this down. Anywhere that there is the primer red or Enfleur, I'm going to be slightly more heavier, and where there is white, I'm just going to be a lot lighter. I'm just going to skim over the edge, and hopefully that should create finer cracks on the white areas and deeper cracks on the darker areas. I have no idea how this is going to work out. I've never done Crackle with this much texture, so we're going to get what we're going to get. It's going to be organic. Let's just have some fun. The Crackle has just about dried. It's taken quite a while. It's quite cold in my workshop. So now in for mixing a vintage green. So I'm going to use some of my favourite tones. You all know that I absolutely love faux, which is a great colour to mix. But this time I'm going to use Amsterdam green to make it more of a true green rather than a yellowy green. And we might add a splash of Enfleur into this colour mix. So I've got my container here and I'm just going to pour enough really to cover the whole project. There we go. So faux goes into the container, and then a splodge of Amsterdam green, and I'm going to pop in another less of an amount of Enfleur. I'm going for a real vintage colour green. So there's the colours that I've got in the container. I'm going to mix them together and see what we get. We may have to add one or two of the other colours in. I'm just going to play it by eye. I think maybe, we'll see. I think a touch more faux. I love Amsterdam green and faux together. You get some wonderful shades of green. There we go. I think that's about right for me. Incorporate it really well. Can you see? Quite a vibrant green. There we go. A lovely, fresh, vibrant green, almost quite spring-like. So that's the shade that I'm going to go with. I've made sure that I've mixed enough to do the whole project. There will probably be a little left over, but nothing goes to waste in my workshop. I will probably intermix it into something else, as you've seen me do before. So I'm just about at the point where I'm going to apply my vintage green to the bed frame. Now, I do want to stress that the Crackle product could do anything. I'm not quite sure. This is out of my hands. It's either going to work really well or it won't work at all. One thing that I do know, if it doesn't work very well on the Crackle, the layer of that thick goopy varnish underneath will allow me to chip away at it, so we can always turn it into a more chippy look. So I suppose it's just one of those things. It's out of my hands. One thing that I can control is how I apply the paint. Now, most Crackles, they don't like agitation with a brush. So I've decided to go with a Klingon brush, a well-used Klingon brush, which has got a synthetic bristle, which will just lay the paint on. Too much of brushing over that area where the Crackle is could disrupt the Crackle and make it come to sort of bobbly paint. Could be quite nice, but I'm gonna lay the paint on. I'm gonna start in the center where I'm gonna go over most of the white first and build up the tones until I feel more comfortable about going up to the finials. I will almost get an instant Crackle, usually with this product, on a flat surface, untextured surface. So I'm just going to play it by eye and see what happens. So let's get stuck in. So that's my vintage green paint just about touch dry. What I would say is with any of the Crackle products, they do take quite a long time to dry and they will continue to crack a little bit further throughout the next 24 hours. If you're using my tutorial, which is Annie Sloan step 1 and 2 into the paint, which I've linked into the description box below, expect those cracks to get larger over the next 12 months. It just continues to happen. It's really fabulous. Nevertheless, this project has got fine hairline cracks, which I put that down to the fact that there's a lot of texture on this surface and there is no flat surfaces on the whole piece. So it's not allowing the paint to stretch, but I absolutely love it. I really love that finer detail and the texture together. It looks awesome. So at this stage, what I was going to do is take a palette knife and chip away a little bit more to those undercolours. But there's something in my psyche that's just saying, don't do too much more to this because it looks absolutely beautiful. I think what I will do is just pick away at a few key areas, nothing over the top, just a few little areas where it might get a little bit of wear and tear, just down to the primer red and the enflure beneath. And then I think I'll give it a good old wax, clear wax over the whole piece, which should then, and polish it in, it should then make this look a little bit more like gloss paint, years of old gloss paint. And we might add a touch of dark wax, and maybe if I'm feeling that it needs a little bit more of rust to it, I might add a touch of cinnamon to the edges of any connection. I'm really happy with the way this is turning out. So all that's left to do at this stage is give the whole piece a coat of clear wax. Now, I know many of you don't enjoy waxing, but I've got to say to you, it's my favourite part. It really does show, when you've got beautiful detail like this, it really does show those details out. Think of it like moisturising your skin. You always glow a little bit more once you've put your moisturiser on. So on with the wax. We may add a touch of dark wax just into a few of these details, and then I'll work out whether the cinnamon thing is going to go on at the end or not. Who knows? So in with the dark wax, and as you can see here, I'm applying this into all of the detailed areas underneath the lips of the finial and into all of those beautiful details around the scroll work in any connection with the art brush. I will be adding more dark wax to the main body of the frame, but with my larger brush and not as much. I suppose the art brush is allowing me to push into those connections and allow it to be a little bit darker. Yes, I did decide to go with my little cinnamon hack. So all I'm doing here is applying some craft glue with a small art brush again, pretty much in all of the same areas underneath connections, perhaps not as much as the dark wax, just underneath the odd dot here and there with my art brush, then sprinkling on just a little bit like glittering at Christmas, sprinkling the cinnamon over, allowing to dry, and then brushing off with a soft brush to reveal the beauty of cinnamon rust. I have to say, with the dark wax into all of that brush texture that we created earlier on in the process, the whole project looks absolutely beautiful. I'm super happy with the way this has turned out. Thank you once again for joining me. If you're new here to my channel, don't forget to hit the subscribe, thumbs up and likes, whatever you can do to help my algorithms for the future of these tutorials. Thank you so much. I will catch you all on the next one.